My countdown? Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Hello Haymarket. I'm Daniel Nyce, and today's guest is...
I'm Thomas Price.
All right. Thomas, you want to explain to the folks out there who have never met you a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So Thomas, I got started in real estate coming up on 10 years ago, just a few months shy. Got started calling around, answering people's questions, and ended up running a team for about 7 years before jumping ship and starting a property management company.
After the last episode that we launched with Mike talking about house hacking, you and I got to talking about your house hack, and we thought it would be really valuable for the people out there who saw that episode to watch this one and see an example of it in action. So kind of to jump us off, why house hack? Because the people out there, if they saw the last episode, they know what it means, they know what it's about, but why did it make sense for you?
Well, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of numbers. I'm a little bit of a numbers guy, so we'll be talking about a whole bunch of that, and hopefully I won't go too deep for you. But it just makes sense. That's the bottom line, is it just makes sense. I mean, when you're talking about purchasing versus renting, when you're talking about the equity pay down, when you're talking about the appreciation, when you're talking about all those different details, it just makes sense. Plus, you have complete freedom. In my situation, obviously, with house hacking, you're going to have people who you're living with. You have complete control over who's in the house with you. And, it just allows you to fit the lifestyle that you want, I guess, so long as you're open to living with roommates.
Can you picture that what would have been different in your life if you had not house hacked?
Well, like I said, I'm a numbers guy, a little bit of a nerd there, so net worth would definitely be different, which that's one piece, but also just having to move every year when the person eventually decides to sell, or having to just deal with different roommates moving out, and then having to figure out all of these details as opposed to having control on actually finding somebody new. I mean, I was able to purchase where I wanted. I was able to live on extremely low monthly payments because of the house hacking.
When he says extremely low, he's always here hanging out in the office, and he'll say basically that he's living for free or close to it.
I essentially spend $100 a month to live in Reston, which is pretty absurd when you're talking about a one-bedroom rental being $17,000 to $2,000 in Reston.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm getting the equity pay down, and the truth is that $100, as I'll explain later, that $100 is it's basically me paying myself $500 every month.
So let's jump into those numbers then for you, Thomas. I'm gonna he brought some stuff here. I'm gonna let him drive for a second. All right, Thomas. So Thomas, take us through some of the numbers. What does it look like?
Yeah, so first things first is I actually have a few numbers here with a few basic graphs that we're gonna talk about, and they're basically just gonna show some of the original purchase numbers, as well as I refinanced down and how much that actually helped, as well as what it would sort of look like if I actually purchased the same home today, all the same things, with the difference being the interest rate. So this first thing that's here, I just wanted to show essentially where I started. So where we started, we had a $2,000 monthly mortgage. $412 of that went to the actual Principal, yes. Yeah. And then when I refinanced it down, this is where we're actually at now. So now I pay $1,800, $611 this past month went to principal. So we're gonna do a little bit, actually I'll show one more real quick, just because this is with the most recent interest rate of about 6.5. So that puts you at 24. So this just gives you an idea of where we're at.
Big difference in the total
very
payment.
Big difference.
Yeah, and not
very
only that,
big difference.
but I see a 283 on there. What does that represent?
Yeah, so 283 is going to principal, which is essentially the equity in your house. That's essentially like a forced savings plan of actually purchasing a home. Compare that to paying $600 less and adding $400 more essentially to the equity. Nuts. So that interest rate makes a really big deal. A lot of people, when they're purchasing, this is just sort of an aside, are always worried about PMI. I am of the belief, do not worry about PMI. When you look at the time value of money, your
for the
PMI
people
just
out there
makes so
who
much
don't
sense.
know PMI.
Go. Oh, PMI is it's basically your mortgage insurance when you have less than 20% equity in the house.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, people look at it and they're like, well, I need to make sure I put 20% down. I put 5% down. And the PMI, when you actually look at the cost of it, with the time that it saves you, with the difference that it actually takes to save up the amount of money, no brainer, no questions asked. And I believe you can even pay down and prepay your PMI to get even more of a discount.
Okay. So let me help dig into this for a second with you. So how long ago did you do the home search to find this property?
Yeah. The home search was an interesting one because I graduated college in 2018 and in May, and I actually bought this house at the end of June. So it was about a month and a half, 2 months. And it basically just came down to me pretty much being homeless. like I lost where I was staying, and so I needed to figure something out. And so I just started looking, and I had the expectation that I'd have like temporary housing for like a month extra than I did. But I went to this house. I went and checked it out I just did the open house, and I had no plans to purchase it because I had planned to actually have a house that I could renovate myself.
Gotcha.
And this one was completely newly renovated. And then the weekend came up. It was it was a week later, and the house still didn't have an offer. And I was like, well, it sort of fits exactly what I'm looking at. I don't have to worry about the extra work, so I just sent it.
So out of college, homeless, finds a house, puts the offer in, 5% down. Your goal is to pay $100 a month for your housing. You found a way to do that.
My goal was essentially to pay as little as possible, right? That's really what it comes down to, and gain the appreciation.
So you bought the house. How many rooms did you rent out?
So I have a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath townhouse, and there's an extra room in the basement. Now, I've lived in basements my entire life. It's sort of just always been where my room was. So to me, I wanted to have a little bit of separation between me and the people who were living there. Mm-hmm. So I took the basement room, and then I had the living room in the basement that was just for me, essentially. Gotcha. So that gives me my own little area where really the only space in the house that I'm sharing is the kitchen.
Gotcha.
Then there's 3 bedrooms on the top floor, and I sort of decided personally that I only wanted to have 2 roommates. So what I decided to do is I had one larger room as the master, rented that out, and then I decided to rent the other 2 smaller rooms to the same person. Gotcha. So rather than having 3 roommates, which we'll go through the numbers later, you can see how much of a bigger difference that would have been.
Sure.
Maybe it would have made sense for me to do. Financially, it definitely would have made sense. But, lifestyle-wise, I just sort of wanted to have 2. Make it easy.
So the total payment that you were responsible for as the homeowner was?
Yeah, so we'll actually go into that. And I'll apologize because these are a little bit. So we'll start at because I've got 2 sort of separations from my original loan and then when I actually refinanced down to a lower interest rate.
Let's start with the original.
So the original's right here. The original number, the other one graph that I showed was just from a calculator, so I could just show it. So it was actually $21,12. I rented out 2 rooms, $800 each.
Yeah.
Super easy. When I say finding them was so easy, it was crazy because people aren't able to find, especially when they're looking alone, they're not able to find a place in Reston to live for $800. Yeah. So it's one of those things that it really does, it's a win-win-win when you do this because you're also helping somebody else out that can then,
And that's a part of the story that often doesn't get told with house hacking is how all the people involved are benefiting. Yeah. Right?
I mean, if they wanted to live, if they essentially wanted to find this, they would have, good luck. If they wanted to find a 1-bedroom place, you're talking about $1,700 to $2,000 a month instead of $800. That changes everything. And it's one thing if you're somebody who's looking with multiple people, maybe you can find something to go in on. But if you're just a solo person trying to find a house, then it's tough.
Yeah, that's rough. Okay, so what other numbers did you have here that you wanted to talk about real quick?
Yeah, so I actually, I did a little bit of breakdown. I had my payment information up top. This was from, it looks like April 2020. So what I did is I just basically took the amortization schedule.
Yes.
And basically, ran some numbers so that people can see what it means over time.
Yeah.
Amortization schedule, for anybody that's curious, is basically just the schedule of payments where the money is going over the life of the loan.
Right.
And so I basically just blasted this out over 10 years, but with the first few being just a few months. So with with this, like I said, 2 rooms, $800 per room. It's actually 3 rooms, and I was just sort of splitting the other one. But my monthly payment, like I said, $212 or $2112. Principal payment was $510 at the time. Outstanding balance, where we really are going to pay attention, is over here on the right side, where we're talking about what this actually means for me. So if I'm collecting $1,600 in rent, that means I'm paying $512, basically towards the mortgage, right?
Right.
And then $510 is going towards principal pay down. So
that math is beautiful. Do you all see what he's just pointing out? Is of his total payment, the amount that goes towards the equity in his home, right? The principal pay down against his loan is $500. And the amount that he's ending up paying out of pocket for his housing is $500.
I'm technically paying $2. I mean, like,
yeah.
I guess I'm
$2.
I'm out $2 for the month in this first one. So, and I mean, yes, you are paying the amount, but like I said, it's going to the equity in your house, so it's a forced savings. So it's literally
it's money that's going from your left hand to your right hand.
Exactly, yeah. And then this is not including appreciation. You know, since I did all of this, my home has gone from, I bought it at $330, and I got 5% back, if I remember right, or maybe it was $335 and I got 5% in seller subsidy.
So people who don't know, seller subsidy means that the seller is actually contributing that 5% just as cash at closing right into Thomas's hands.
Exactly. And so what that means is I even have a lower closing costs, because essentially what they did is pay most of the closing costs. So when I put 5% down, I was almost only paying 5%, right? As opposed to having to add closing costs on top of that and all of those other things. Yeah. But essentially, you're taking money from your left hand, you're putting it in your right. When I bought it $330, it was, in terms of money that I actually spent, it is now $425. So this is only talking about the pay down of equity. This isn't talking about the appreciation, because over those 4 years, it's gone up almost 100,000.
But so what's the bottom number? You calculated this out after 10 years. So out of 10 years, how much money going from your left hand to your right hand will you have in the nest egg of that house?
$10,754.
That's a
if
lot
we
of
want to
money.
be precise.
Yeah. And that's just the equity pay down. Again, that's not counting any of the other factors at play here.
Exactly. It's been 4 years and it's gone up by nearly 100,000.
Yeah.
So essentially, 110,000 is what we're looking at, and my cost to actually live in the home was roughly $500.
Right. And you mentioned that you did a refinance. When did that happen?
So I refinanced 2 years ago, right before COVID. And so I did bring those numbers as well, and it did, like I said, drastically change things from $2112 to $1812 is my new payment. And the biggest piece there is with the actual principal pay down.
Right.
So the principal pay down, because of the lower interest, jumps to $600.
Right.
And at the same time, I also was able to raise the rental rate. So this is another piece when we're looking at this schedule here, is this is assuming you're only going to keep the rent constant over 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is not going to happen because inflation, things happen.
Rents are going to go up.
So I actually now charge $850 for the 2 rooms. So essentially now I'm paying $113 towards the mortgage every month, but $600 on the first month was going towards the actual equity pay down. So I moved $487 over.
So for those of you who are not following the math, let me break it down for you for just a moment. So he's got, after his refinance now, the amount of money that he's got to pay is $1,800. Now, each of his tenants is paying him $850, which only leaves $100 more out of pocket for him to deal with, right? So of that $1,800, roughly $700 of it, right, is going to the bank as interest, but the other $600 is going into his house, paying down his loan, creating equity, right? So he is basically every month turning $100 into $600 through the magic of this vehicle. This is an incredible investment vehicle where not only has he almost entirely wiped out his housing expenses, meaning he can then turn around and spend that money in other investments, but he is also magically turning $100 into $600 every month like clockwork when he's sleeping.
Plus appreciation.
Not yet. It doesn't even include the $100,000 of appreciation that he's gained while he's sleeping. Because that's the other thing. You didn't buy in a cash flow market. You found a way to invest in an appreciation market. The DC metro area, all of Northern Virginia, is an area that appreciates like crazy. We have a roaring economy here because we've got a ton of government jobs keeping everything stable. Lots of tech stuff coming in here as well. It is a very difficult place to find cash flowing investments, but you were able to cash flow your house.
Yeah, and one thing to actually touch on that, because that's actually such a good point, is what happens if I want to move, right? Mm-hmm. Because one of the things when my initial payment was $2,100, rental rates for the whole house to a single family would have been $1,800 at the time.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, if I'm moving out, now I'm having to cover $300 still while not living there. Mm-hmm. But because I house hacked, I now have the ability to continue. If I decide to move, I can place somebody else. Take that $850 for two, just add one more, ignoring that fourth bedroom, add one more to make it 3 roommates, and now all of a sudden, I'm making $737 on this amount. So it gives you the opportunity to continue what you're doing after the fact as well, which keeps the home cash flowing.
Yeah.
In an appreciating market where it's tough.
It's hard to calculate an ROI when you're spending 0 and getting back 700.
Exactly.
Well, how do you calculate that ROI? Right? While he sleeps, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good deal. That's a really good deal. So overall, do you have a number for how much your net worth has been affected since you bought this house?
So I'm a nerd. I've already said this a few times, and it's true. I calculate my net worth every week, and I have an app that does it every day on top of that. So manual once a week and automatically as well. So when I bought my house in 2018, I was not wealthy. I think I was making like $50,000 a year. So that's another piece where it's like, oh my gosh, I've got this huge expense, and I was, there's all those concerns. So I was making like $50,000 out of college, maybe less. And my net worth was about negative $25,000.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was
I'm sure you can connect with a lot of listeners out there who are in a similar situation, right?
Yeah. So, and what's nice is, right when you purchase it with the seller subsidy, they gave $5,000. Your net worth sort of goes up by $5,000 because of that seller subsidy, in a sense, or it's because the actual pay down sort of just goes across. So, started about negative $25,000 in 2020. I hit 0 and I cried.
Congratulations.
I cried when I hit 0, and it was like a big day for me. But in terms of the actual net worth directly that came from the property, I believe we're looking at about $120,000.
Gotcha.
Because you got to take essentially $90,000 worth of the appreciation, and then you've got to take the actual equity pay down at the same time. Yeah. So when you calculate that over, that might be a little bit high. I think it's probably more like 110. Mm-hmm.
And this again, when we're running numbers like this, we have to decide what we're going to include and what we're not going to include. Something that he's not including here is the fact that he was able to deploy what he would have spent on housing.
Yeah.
What would have been essentially rent. He's now able to deploy that every month towards other investments.
Exactly.
So that's not even included here. The opportunity cost of renting is not even included. This is just straight on his house.
Yeah.
He has gone from negative 25 to positive 120.
Yeah.
That's a huge leap in how many years?
4 years.
4 years. Who else is able to make that happen in 4 years?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely pretty substantial. Like I said, I cried when I hit 0, so didn't come from a wealthy family. So I was like, this is huge. I don't
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it is definitely really impactful. I think I would say that until very recently, it was the number one impact to my net worth, until extremely recently. So, 4 years is, it's pretty crazy when you look at it.
The first 100's the hardest.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you look at it like that.
Yeah. So for the listeners out there who are interested in trying this for themselves, what kind of tips would you have to help them get started?
Great question. So, first things first, decide why you're doing this. So decide if you're doing this this is so contrary to what I actually believe, but I do think it's important. Decide if you're doing this for your lifestyle, if you're doing this for your ability to live in a nicer place. Decide what the goal is there before you even start looking. Because when you're going to purchase, truthfully, I bought the wrong house. Like, there was another house that I was neck and neck trying to decide on. I went on the one that was the finished one rather than the one that I was going to fix up, simply because lifestyle, I needed to close quickly, all of those things. And that other one, by the way, would have bought $330,000. $17,000 was what it needed for renovation cost, and the neighbor just sold for $650,000.
Sold it for $650,000.
Yeah.
Okay, but hey, you live, you learn. We can poor oppressed Thomas.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor oppressed Thomas, who's made $100,000 sleeping for the last 4 years.
And the truth is, when I look at that, you just remind yourself, oh, I mean, you can't look back through rose-colored glasses or whatever you call it. You can't look back 20/20 vision, all that, whatever it is, whatever the phrase is that I just mixed up like crazy. You can't look back and say, oh, I should have done this. No, you did something. That's huge. Just doing something is the important piece. My neighborhood happened to be the one that appreciated the least amount in Reston over the last 4 years. And I regret nothing.
Yeah, you took action, which is the most important thing, right? Instead of going back and crying about poor oppressed Thomas, he made the wrong decision. It's really hard to say that he made, Jim Rohn used to say, the best thing you can do is the best thing.
Yeah.
The second best thing you can do is the wrong thing. But then the worst thing you can do is nothing, right? And there's a lot of people out there who get stuck in analysis paralysis and they do nothing, right? You did something and now you are way ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it changed a lot. I mean, I could imagine me over the last 4 years spending $1,400 a month to live with a roommate in Arlington or whatever it is.
Yeah, like your tenants are doing for you.
Well, they're paying $800, so even they're making out, right?
Yeah.
But if I were doing that, then it's just all of a sudden, that makes such a big impact on the money that I can spend and the lifestyle that I can have.
Yeah.
So that is an important thing, is sort of deciding up front. When you're looking at the house, decide what your lifestyle is that you're comfortable with. Me, I wanted to live in a basement. I wanted to have a separate living room that was to myself, so those things mattered. So that was sort of the criteria that I had. I wanted to be in Reston, so that was criteria I had. Check the rooms. You can check on Facebook. You can check on Zillow for room rentals to sort of see what the room rental rate is around. Those are some things that you can have in the front or in the back of your mind when you're actually looking. And then ultimately, just skip over some steps by making sure you're having a lease in place. Make sure there's an exit in 30 to 60 days that you can kick them out at any time because you're living with this person.
Yeah.
You don't want to be stuck with somebody you don't like forever. So have a lease in place. Make sure that 30, 60 days they can get out or you can get out.
And now we're starting to see him segue into his business that he's running, right? Home Pro Property Management.
Yeah, I guess that was the first step to property management.
I can see how this was, like you said, a very good first step, dipping the toes in the water for what you would later develop.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
With your Home Pro Property Management company.
Yeah, so it worked out.
And we need to have you back on to talk about that. But I think for today, let's wrap this up with, if you have any last tips, or if not, you can let the listeners know how they can get in touch with you.
Last tips, it's sort of like you said. Spend a little bit of time looking at the numbers, but if you think you should do it, you should probably do it. Yeah. Don't hesitate too long, because the appreciation is the biggest piece. And that might not be cash in your pocket today, but it absolutely is cash in your pocket tomorrow.
Yep.
So, but other than that, no, I mean, that's pretty much about it. If anybody wants to reach out, they can go to my website, homepropm.com. PM is in property management, and that's about it.
Okay. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, make sure that you like, subscribe, and drop us a comment. Let us know what kind of questions you have for Thomas, or better yet, reach out directly. All right, thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.